What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we dive into the Midweek Magic Future Precon event here in MTG Arena. This event is probably going on for about another 24 hours after you see this video, give or take. So if you missed the event, we'll get a glimpse of what the new starter decks will be getting in before September with rotation. These decks are usually released in Arena probably in like the end of July, beginning of August, depending on how things go. But this is definitely pretty cool to get an idea, test out the Precon decks and get a feel for what new starters are coming. And as we get closer to the release of these decks, I'll probably go a little bit deeper into each one individually, do a little bit of gameplay, and probably also then do a little bit of a breakdown of how to upgrade them from the base starter deck to then into a little bit more of a competitive deck, in the sense if you're looking to upgrade these decks and use them for your Magic playing. But with that being said, let's just dive into the decks and let's just talk about them. So the first deck up here on the list is actually kind of surprising, as it is an Angel deck that kind of, plays a little bit of the Azorius side. And it's definitely one of those decks I didn't think that would still kind of be around in some form or essence. But, now looking at this deck, it does have a couple unique cards in the deck that kind of help it still make it Angels, even if it does play a few cards that aren't Angels for the most part. The one big notable here, the mythic that you get with this deck, if you don't already own it, is going to be the Elspeth Resplendent Angel. She is a 5-mana planeswalker with the ability here that she can +1, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and then you get to also put a +1/+. You then also get to put a counter among flying for strike, lifelink, and or vigilance on it. So giving it that additional ability, which is definitely very, very strong. Most of the time here, you're probably going to put like vigilance, you're probably going to put like lifelink, and you're probably going to put first strike over flying, as most of the other cards in their deck do fly over for the most part. Or we have cards in the deck will help some of the cards overall get flying in the later game. Definitely a good planeswalker in that sense. You also have the -3, which is like a dig ability. You can have -3. You get to look at top 7 cards of our library. You can choose a permanent card with a mana value 3 or less, put on the battlefield tapped with a shield counter on it, which is definitely pretty awesome. Which is definitely a good ability. It gives it that additional protection, so your opponent can't immediately spot removal it unless it has an exile effect. The card will have a shield counter, which prevents it from being destroyed. And then if we get to the -7, we can create 5 3/3 white angel creature tokens with flying, which is definitely pretty good. Yet again, if you can kind of keep her around and kind of plus in her, using -3 sparingly depending on the board state, you'll probably hit the -7 pretty decently. The other card here, would be like, well, we're getting rid of all the angels from call time, and we're also not playing black in any sort. And I don't think, post rotation will really have any angels that are in the black mana basis. But we have a card here which is Sigarda's Summons. It's a 6-mana enchantment. It's a little bit on the expensive side, but it gives creatures we control +1/+1 counters on them, have base power and toughness. 4/4, so they go up from their base power and toughness, or whatever they are, they'll go up to a 4/4. They also have flying, and they also become angels in addition to their other types, this is kind of like that card that helps make this deck an angel deck, even if it's not fully an angel deck outside of this card. I do see the one downside being it is 6 mana. It's a little bit of investment. It's one of those things I would say, if you are looking to upgrade this deck, when we get later, I'll just kind of touch on it real quick. You probably want a couple additional copies of this, maybe get rid of some cards that aren't working for the most part. But yet again, this is definitely a decent angel deck, I would say, and the more up-to-date standard. A couple other cards to note, we have things like Rafine's Informant. It's a 2-mana 2/1. It's a human wizard, and just battlefield it connives, but with the ability of, it getting the +1/+1 counters if we discard that non-land permanent. Then when we play, this Sigarda's Summons, that creature now becomes a 4/4, human wizard flyer, with the additional +1/+1 counter from the connive ability. You also have like Lion Sash here, which is a 2-mana artifact that eats permanents in graveyards, and every time it eats a permanent, get to put a +1/+1 counter on Lion Sash, and then it can be equipped as an equipment, which then gives the target creature +1/+1 for each +1/+1 counter on Lion Sash for 2. Definitely pretty cool. Definitely in a very interesting deck. Like I said, it's definitely kind of one of those things. Kind of like I said, I'll kind of go over the rares that you kind of get. Is Sigarda's Summons. You'll get an Elspeth Informant. You'll get one Undercover Operative, which is definitely pretty awesome as well. It'll give you an additional copy of maybe a creature that maybe want to get additional effect. You can also steal the effect of maybe one of your opponent's creatures, depending on what they're playing. Outside of that, we got also the Lion Sash, which is a rare. And we also have Yada here, which is definitely yet again another card that works very well with angels. Once all your creatures turn into angels, they'll all enter the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on them for each other angel we're already controlling. And you can tap her for mana and spend that mana to cast angel spells. But overall, very, very interesting deck, and just a couple ways to kind of get some additional, +1/+1 counters on creatures, maybe on the cheap. In the mana base, it's pretty straightforward. It is a little choppy because we do lose pathways, and then we're really only left with the triomes and the dual lands from from Innistrad. So I would say if you're looking to upgrade this deck as well in the mana base, Deserted Beaches, all these dual lands from Innistrad and Crimson Vow, those are probably really want to invest land-wise coming into the September, unless they announce some other land type in the new September set. But Deserted Beaches and all those duels will be definitely very good in the future. But overall, pretty decent, intro deck for the game. Being a pretty decent Angel deck, I would say, pretty straightforward on what it's trying to do. Put plus and counters on things. Play your big enchantment and then make everything angels in the process. Overall, cool deck. So the next deck up on the list is another interesting deck here. This is an Orzhov kind of artifact / enchantment deck. And the idea around this deck is we're trying to use the ability of sacrifice and artifacts. We're going to try to get things back from the graveyard to the battlefield, enchantment or artifact wise, while, getting bonus effects when they enter battlefields and things like that. A couple cards of note, the one being kind of like the main enchantment of the deck, is being a 5-mana Spirit Sister's Call. At the beginning of our end step, we get to choose target permanent card we control in the graveyard. We may sacrifice a permanent card that shares a type with that chosen card. If we do, return the chosen card to the graveyard on the battlefield, and this card gains if this card would leave the battlefield, exile instead of putting it anywhere else. So it allows you to double trigger your artifacts and or enchantment abilities. Like if you have a Circuit Mender, you can bring back a Circuit Mender to the battlefield, gain the 2 life, and then if Circuit Mender then gets eaten by a Sister's Spirit Mender, you're going to draw a card and then maybe bring it back later. Other card is you also got Lycia, Forgotten Archangel, another strong angel here, that whenever a non-token creature we control dies, we have to return that card to the owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. If a creature opponent would die, you have to exile it instead. So overall, very, very good angel there. That's another notable rare. Mysterious Limousine is kind of an interesting artifact in the deck. It kind of eats tokens for the most part. Also can eat maybe one big creature your opponent has. And then every time it attacks and or enters the battlefield, you can, switch out the creature. You can crew it for 2 for a 4/4. We also have Soul Transfer, yet again another solid sorcery removal spell. Choose one. If you control an artifact, an enchantment, you may cast the spell as you can choose both. The 2 abilities it has is you exile target creature or planeswalker, and then the second ability is you return target creature or planeswalker from the graveyard to our hand, which is definitely very good, getting things back from the graveyard that may be necessary depending on the game state. We also have Restoration of Aganjo. It's a 3-mana saga that becomes a creature later on. The first ability is you get to search your library for a plains card, reveal it, put it into our hand, and then shuffle. Chapter 2 is you discard a card. When you do, return target permanent card with mana value 2 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. And then Chapter 3 is you flip it over to the 3/4 angel as you see above. With Vigilance, and whenever this attacks or blocks, you create a 1/1 Spirit creature token, which is definitely good for sacrifice fodder, also for chump blocking depending on the game state. Then in the 2-drop slot, we have a Mokotai Soul Ripper, 2-mana 4/3 vehicle that whenever it attacks, may sacrifice another artifact or creature. If we do, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on it, and it gains menace at the end of turn. So not only does it become stronger, it also gains menace, making your opponent have to then commit 2 blockers to it in order to block it. Overall, very, very good card there. And like I said, the deck is definitely very interesting. It's playing around a lot of enchantments, a lot of artifacts, trying to use that ability here. Mana base is pretty straightforward, just like the last deck. The one thing I would say, you probably don't, if this is only an uncommon land, I know I'm kind of blocking it, but the ability, it's a colorless land, so it only produces colorless mana. But the reason why it's in the deck is for its secondary ability. That is 2 mana, you tap it, you sacrifice it, we draw a card if we control an artifact, we draw a card if we control an enchantment. If we control both, we draw 2 cards for 2 mana, which is definitely very good. But it is a colorless land, and this is definitely one of those decks that is a little bit dependent on having your white and your black mana on the battlefield, as there are spells in our deck that require double black and double white in order to play. So it is kind of one of those lands that if you were going to upgrade, you probably don't want to put more than maybe 1 or 2 in this deck. But you definitely want to get your additional Shattered Sanctums in here. But definitely an overall cool deck that has some cool mechanics about, sacrificing things, bringing them back, and kind of redoing it that way. Definitely a cool deck regardless. So the next deck up on the list is going to be a Simic deck called Blossoming Growth. It's kind of like, in a weird way, a splash of what we kind of have with it. If you've ever seen the Simic decks of more recent, where it has a lot of early game ramp, we're just trying to get into our later, more expensive, more premium spells of the deck. One of the cards being, which is definitely pretty cool, is that it has 1 copy of Titan of Mastery, Titan of Industry in here, a 7-mana 7/7 Reach Trampler creature that has a bunch of abilities that you enter when it enters the battlefield. You get to choose 2. 1, you get to destroy target artifact or enchantment. You can also gain 5 life. You can also create a 4/4 green rhino creature token, or you can put a shield counter on a target creature, whether itself or another creature you have. But definitely a very, very strong value card for the deck. Outside of that, we also have Hullbreaker Horror here. It looks like, I wasn't aware of it until I actually got to this deck, that it does have the alchemy version of the deck, but once we kind of get this deck officially and not in this event style, you can always switch the deck from being the alchemy version to the regular standard version, and it doesn't require you to actually have that additional Hullbreaker Horde to swap it out. So you can play the regular standard version of it, but it's a 7 mana, 7/8 flash that whenever we cast a spell, we can choose up to 1. We can return target spell we don't control to its owner's hand, and return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So definitely a cool card there. You can counter spells essentially, or just make your opponent have to double play or replay them multiple times. Also bounce the things back that gets annoying after a while. Really, the alchemy nerf to it is I think the official one, the standard one, the regular print one, just it can't be countered. So that's the only thing that really gets taken away in this alchemy version of it. But still a very, very strong card for 7 mana, and this deck definitely has a lot of ways to kind of ramp up into that. We have Sludge Monster here at 5 mana, 5/5. Whenever it enters battlefield or attacks, you're going to put a slime counter and put the one target creature. Non-horror creatures with slime counters on them lose all abilities, have base power and toughness of 2/2. So if your opponent has a big creature that has, like let's just say they have their own Titan of Industry, you put a slime counter on it. It becomes a 2/2, though it still has a shield counter if they have a shield counter on it, but it becomes a 2/2 and loses all of the other abilities, I believe. So definitely a pretty interesting card nonetheless. Overall, very, very good card that kind of works well what we're trying to do. We also have Glorious Sunrise, a 5 mana enchantment that at the beginning of our combat, each turn we can choose one. Creatures we control get +1/+1, gain trample to end a turn. Most of our big creatures do have trample, though I would say the Hullbreaker Horde doesn't. We give target land gains the ability to tap in for 3 mana until end of turn. We draw a card if control creature powered 3 or greater, or we gain 3 life, which is definitely pretty good. But most of the time when we get this out and we have other creatures on the battlefield, we just want to give them +1/+1, probably trample to kind of finish off our opponent without having them be able to react. We have Croaking Counterpart, a 3 mana sorcery that created a non-token creature that's a copy of target non-frog creature, except it's a 1/1 green frog for 3 mana. So let's just say you can get another Titan of Industry here with this and make it a 1/1 green frog, but then you get the ability to gain some life, get the ability to pump it out of 4/4, or giving something a shield counter, and then you can flash it back and do it all over again. Or you, like I said, you can also do a Hullbreaker Horror, which I believe is also not a legendary creature, so you can have an additional copy of that, which is definitely pretty awesome in that regard. And then, like I said, you flash it back for 5 mana, makes it definitely a strong card. Then we also have Triskathfiel. Can't actually say that word, but it's a 2 mana 1/3 that we give us no maximum hand size. And at the beginning of our upkeep, if we have exactly 13 cards in our hand, we win the game, and we can tap 4 mana and just draw a card. Interesting kind of win concept. It's definitely kind of a cool concept. I'm not saying you're going to pull it off very often, but definitely a cool concept that your opponent may be like, holy crap, they're going to win the game if they get 13 cards in their hand. But definitely a cool card regardless. But like I said, this deck is definitely another interesting deck. It's playing Simic. Its focus is just trying to ramp up as quickly as possible by playing treasures, by playing spells that are going to help us get additional lands out. We have things that allow us to play additional lands with the Azusa of Many Journeys. You get like things like Jewel Thief, which boosts treasure counters when it comes down the battlefield. But definitely pretty cool deck nonetheless. If you're looking in for a little bit of a rampy deck, a little bit of a deck that's just trying to play very expensive spells, this is definitely a good deck. Mana base, like I said, with most of the decks, you probably just want to upgrade into just having additional the dual lands. These lands will probably become a new staple in Standard. And just get rid of tap lanes, because tap lanes kind of slow you down for the most part. But overall, yet again, a cool deck that kind of tries to play top-end, big, expensive spells. Next deck up here on the list is another interesting deck. It's called Grave Matters. It's using like your graveyard effects, getting things in the graveyard, milling things, and making your creatures that much bigger. A couple notable cards of the deck that stick out is you have a Springleaf Avenger, 5 mana, 6/5 with an ninjutsu. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, return card from a graveyard to our hand. So it kind of, has the ability of getting things back if it does damage to your opponent. You can also cheat it out for 4 mana instead of 5, which is definitely pretty cool, by playing the ninjutsu ability, which is if your creature goes in and unblocked, you can bounce that creature back and play this card in its place, and then you get 6 damage in, get a card back from your graveyard, which is definitely very good there. We have 1 copy of Old Rutstein, a 3 mana 1/4. When it enters the battlefield, when it enters the battlefield or at the beginning of our upkeep, we get to mill a card. If it was a land card, mill this way, we create a treasure. If it was a creature, we create a 1/1 green insect. If it was a non-creature or non-land card, mill this way, we create blood tokens, which also become very good as you can draw deeper into our deck for only 1 mana. We got, Old Stick Fingers of 2-mana X ability creature that when we cast a spell, we reveal cards on the top of our library until we get X creature cards. Put all the creature cards revealed this way into the graveyard and put the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. And its power and toughness are equal to the number of creature cards in our graveyard. So not only based off of the creatures we milled with the card, but the additional cards, creatures that are in our deck, it'll come in as that power and toughness for only, whatever mana we tap. Overall, pretty cool card. Definitely interesting card for the deck. We have Ghoul Caller's Harvest, a 2-mana sorcery that we would create X 2/2 zombie creature tokens with decay, where X is half the number of creature cards in our graveyard rounded up, so we get a bunch of creatures in that sense, and we can flash it back for 5 mana. This is definitely one of those cards you probably want to play later in the game once you milled probably a decent amount of creatures into our graveyard. But overall, pretty cool, interesting deck for a deck that's focused on milling things into our graveyard, especially creatures. We got Shigeki Jukai Visionary, 2-mana, 1/3 legendary enchantment creature druid. For 2 mana, if it's out on the battlefield, we can return it back to our hand. We reveal the top 4 cards of our library. We may play a land card among them onto the battlefield tapped, put the rest into our graveyard. Or we can play the channeled ability, which is an XX double green. We discard Shigeki and return X target non-legendary creature cards from our graveyard to our hand. Non-legendary cards, not non-creatures. So pretty much any card in our graveyard that's not a legendary card, we can return it back to our hand. And then we probably in the later game, if we have this, we probably want to get back a bunch of things. We get back removal, we get back, any creatures that we want to play out. Overall, very, very strong card. And in the early game, like I said, is a little bit of a ramp spell. Other than that, you have, Tenacious Underdog, great card that if you mill it into your graveyard, you can always blitz it back out by paying the 4 mana and paying 2 life, which is definitely very good at the cost of 2 life. So in the later game, if you're getting a little bit low, it's not something you always want to blitz out, but definitely still a very, very strong card. And the other thing I'm noticing here, unless I missed it, is I'm not seeing the Mythic. Well, I'm not seeing a Mythic, but still definitely an interesting deck. I mean, I'm going to guess the reason why they didn't put a Mythic in here is because of the power, but overall, it's a very interesting deck. It's a very mill-centric deck that focuses on mill effect, getting things in the graveyard, benefiting from having things in the graveyard, having things that, puts things in the graveyard. But definitely cool deck. Definitely a deck if you're looking for that mill thing. Maybe want to try old Stick Fingers. This is definitely a deck for you. But overall, cool deck nonetheless. All right, so the next deck up on the deck is Ignite the Forge, which is a deck focused around the Anvil. It's definitely an interesting deck to kind of see what Wizards' take on an Anvil deck is, especially for a starter deck. For the most part, if you haven't played Anvil, it plays a lot of the cards that I do think that you see here. It also has some cards that I would not recommend playing at Anvil, but definitely still a good starting point if you're looking to just kind of play a deck that focuses around Anvil. And if you don't know what Anvil is, it's a 2-mana artifact that's an uncommon that whenever one or more artifacts leave the battlefield during our turn, create a 1/1 colorless artifact construct creature token, and this ability only triggers once each turn. And we tap it, sacrifice an artifact. Only called Anvil deals 1 damage to each opponent, and we gain 1 life. Definitely a cool card there. We have our Mythic of the deck is Atsuchi of the Blazing Sky, 4 mana for a 4 flying trampler. That whenever it dies, we get to choose one. We exile top 2 cards of our library until the end of next turn. We play those cards, or we create 3 treasure tokens, which is definitely, I think, kind of like a strong point here. Again, 3 treasures, which is good ramp. Also, kind of combine the treasure tokens. We sacrifice them for mana. We trigger Unicode Anvil, which is definitely good there. Overall, very, very good card. It's a 4 mana flying trampler, which is definitely very good for curve. Outside of that, we then have, Falcon Wrath Forebearer, a 3 mana 3/1 flyer that it can't block. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we create a blood token. You can sacrifice 2 blood tokens, return to the graveyard, return it from the graveyard to the battlefield, which is definitely very good. So it really only can't come back unless we don't have any blood or it gets exiled. But definitely a cool rare there. We have Professional Facebreaker, 3 mana 2/3 menace. Whenever one or more creatures would deal combat damage to a player, we create a treasure token. And we can sacrifice treasure, exile top card of our library. We play this card this turn. Yet again, another way to sacrifice artifacts for additional effects and then get additional 1/1 creature out of it. Circuit Mender makes the cut because it is a decent artifact that, plays very well with this sacrifice ability as we gain 2 life when it initially comes out. And we get to draw a card when it leaves the battlefield. Outside of that, we also have the Voldaren Bloodcaster, 2 mana 2/1 Vampire Wizard, 2/1 flyer that whenever it or another non-token creature we control dies, we get a blood token. Whenever we create a blood token, if we control 5 or more, we get to transform it into a 3/3. And at the beginning of our combat, each turn, up to 1 target blood token we control becomes a 2/2 bat creature token with flying and haste in addition to its other's type. So definitely an interesting card there. And then the last card for the most part that's in here that's a rare is we got the Eater of the Virtue. It's a whenever a creature dies, we exile it. Creature gets +2/+0, and as long as a card exiled by either of Virtue has flying, equipped creature has flying. The same is true for first strike, double strike, death touch, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, protection, reach, trample, and vigilance. So it's a 1-mana equipment that also has equipability of 1, and then this eventually just gains the ability of whatever creatures are attached to it that die from it. But overall, very interesting deck to look at when it comes to an Anvil deck. It's still a decent starter deck, I would say, you know, for the most part. There's a few cards in here I probably would cut and probably make it closer to the actual meta version of Anvil. But definitely, if you're looking to play Anvil, this is definitely a good way to start. If you don't have any of the cards, this deck will definitely give you those cards to start with it. Next deck up on the list is going to be On the Hunt, which is kind of like a deck, I'm assuming, just based on, you know, who's on the starter deck. This is a deck focused around playing werewolves or wolves in general, and it's definitely very telling. It's a Gruul werewolf deck for the most part. Some of the notable cards in it is going to be Helena and Helena Partners. If you haven't seen this card, it's definitely a great card in the sense that it's a 4-mana 2/3 first strike reacher. At the beginning of our combat each turn, we get to put a X+1/+1 counters on another creature we control, where X is Helena and Helena's power, and that creature gains haste until end of turn. So a creature that immediately comes in the battlefield that can attack, and the creature just eventually will just get +2/+2 counters. And if there's any way we can pump Helena and Helena, that creature will get even more +1/+1 counters, which is definitely very good there. We have a couple Arlen, Pack of Hopes, 4-mana Planeswalker that with Daybound Nightbound cycle. On the Daybound side, until our next turn, we cast creatures as though they had flash, so we can go and turn our werewolf deck into more of a tempo deck, and then they enter the battlefield with additional +1/+1 counter on them, and they can -3. We have 2 wolf token creatures. On the Nightbound side, it is +2. We can add red and green mana, and for 0 until end of turn, she becomes a 5/5 werewolf creature with trample, indestructible, and haste, so she attack in immediately. Definitely pretty cool. Definitely a decent planeswalker. She doesn't, I feel like, see a lot of play just because she is a bit slower with the way the meta currently is, but definitely pretty cool to see that she is in the deck. After that, we have the Howlpack Piper. It's a 4-mana creature werewolf that can't be countered. For 2 mana, we can tap her, and we're going to put a creature card from our hand onto the battlefield. If it's a wolf or werewolf, we have to untap Piper and activate only as a sorcery. So she can essentially cheat out our creatures that are a little bit more expensive, and then, you know, do it multiple times if they are wolves or werewolves. And then on the flip side, that whenever a creature enters the battlefield and or transforms into Wildsong Howler, look at the top 6 cards of our library. We can reveal a creature card among them, put it into our hand, and put the rest on the bottom of our library in any random order. So her flip effect isn't as strong as I would say her normal Daybound side effect, but, you know, still a good card that helps us keep tempo up by keeping creatures in our hand just in case our opponent starts to remove cards from the field. Then after that, we have Tolvar, Dire Overlord, 3-mana 3/3 creature that when a wolf or a werewolf would deal damage to a player, we have to draw a card. At the beginning of our upkeep, if we control 3 or more wolves or werewolves, it becomes night and transform any number of human werewolves we control. And then on the flip side, whenever a wolf or werewolf we control deal damage to a player, we still draw a card, but we can also then gain the ability of tap in X into a green and a red. Target wolf or werewolf control get +X/+0 into end of turn and trample, which is definitely pretty awesome, which definitely is a pretty strong effect. It's definitely an effect that's going to help finish off your opponent. Outside of that, we have Howlin' at the Moon, 3-mana enchantment at the beginning of our combat. Target wolf or werewolf control gets +2/+2 at end of turn. Whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, create a 2/2 green wolf creature token. So it's one of those things that will get better as the game goes on. When your opponent starts getting more mana, they can cast multiple spells. You know, if they're trying to flip it back from night to day, they can, you know, pay the 2 spells. We get a wolf out of it, which makes our board that much stronger. Definitely a pretty cool card there. Also, we have the Reckless Stormseeker in the deck, a 3-mana 2/3 human werewolf. At the beginning of our combat each turn, target creature control gets +1/+0 and gains haste. On the flip side, it pretty much grows a little bit bigger, becomes a 3/4, and then target creature control gets +2/+0, gains trample and haste at the end of turn. Outside of that, the deck is pretty sweet. It's definitely a decent starting point if you're looking to play werewolves. It definitely has a lot of good cards in it, I would say, for the most part. It does, you know, like I said, you know, it does look like out of all of them so far, this seems like kind of like a stronger of the werewolf decks. From what is included and the power level. Definitely a cool deck to check out if you're looking to play maybe like a wolf or a werewolf tribal. Cool deck nonetheless. So the next deck up on the list is going to be a Spellweaver deck. This is probably a deck focused on playing instants and sorceries for the most part. I actually haven't really looked at this deck, but from what I can tell based on what I see in the deck, it's just trying to get benefits of us playing these additional spells and you know, sorceries, and, you know, has creatures that gain benefits for us playing them. You know, one of the cards in the deck that is definitely a very good deck in this deck is Leer. It's a 3/4. Spells can't be countered as long as it's your turn. Each instant and sorcery in our graveyard has flashback. The flashback cost is equal to the mana cost. The non-alchemy version of the deck is actually version of this card is a lot better. The difference is that you saw the effect of all the spells in our graveyard have flash, but it's actually either turn you can play them, so it becomes a little bit better in the non-alchemy version. But overall, still a very, very good card. Like I said, once we officially get the decks, you can always switch to the standard version, which you then get the more powerful version of Lear. But definitely still a strong card regardless. We also have Burn Down the House in the deck, a 5 mana, deal 5 damage across the board to each creature and planeswalker. Or you can make 3 1/1 devil creature tokens that when it dies, you deal 1 damage to any target. They gain haste in the end of turn. Still decent removal there. Memory Deluge, a good, strong draw spell, 4 mana. You look at top X cards of your library based on the mana that was spent to cast this spell. So 4 is usually the initial. And then the secondary ability is the flashback. You can do it again. Overall, very, very good card there. We have Geist Flame Reservoir, 3 mana artifact that whenever cast into a sorcery spell, we get to put a charge counter on it. For 2 mana, we can remove any of them, deal that much damage to any target. So you can do to opponent's face or to one of their creatures or planeswalkers. And then 2 mana, exile top card of our library. We may play it this turn. So it has 2 different effects. So in the early game, you probably want to exile top card of your library, get that tempo going. So you maybe look for your land or look for a spell to play. And then the late game, maybe when it has a decent amount of counters, you can always tap it and deal that damage to where you want to. We have Vodki, Astral Archmage, a 3 mana 1/2 wizard. I really haven't seen this card for the most part being played, but if it's neither day or night, it becomes day. Enters the battlefield, insert a sorcery spell, cost X less to cast, where X is its power. So initially, if we can't grow it, it's going to be, our spells will cost 1 less. And whenever night becomes day or day becomes night, it'll put +1/+1 counter on Vadric. So it'll become stronger and stronger as the game goes on. So that's kind of where this creature will get its power from, and then making the spells cost less. And, making all our spells, essentially cost whatever mana colors they cost is definitely much better overall. Outside of that, we also have Smoldering Egg, a spell that, gets counters on, ember counters on it based on the casting cost of the spell we casted. And then when we get 8 or more counters on it, we get to flip it to the dragon, and then whenever we cast it into a sorcery spell, it deals 2 damage to any target. Overall, very, very good card. Definitely a good card that you probably want to add more copies of in a deck that just focuses on instants and sorceries. But this deck is definitely kind of on the interesting side. It's kind of like trying to, play the spell initially and then also play the spell again with Lear. Also take advantage of things that get counters and things like that based on having additional spells out. A little bit of the day-night cycle, but overall still a decent deck. It's going to be one of those things to kind of see if Izzet can kind of still be a thing once you lose things like Goldspan Dragon. But still, there's still a lot of good blue and red spells in the format regardless. And the mana base is, like I said, for the most part, around 25 lands. You just kind of take the tap lands, make them these dual lands, and then kind of go from there. But still a decent deck to check out if you're looking for something maybe a little bit of, wouldn't say control, but a little bit of like a Izzet Burn style deck to play. Definitely a cool deck to check out. Next deck up on the list is going to be a Ninjutsu style deck. If you don't know what Ninjutsu is, it's an effect that came with Kamigawa. Essentially, you can pay the Ninjutsu cost other than paying the actual mana cost of an ability. You can only do this if your creature was unblocked, but essentially you would then attack in. If a creature's unblocked, you pay the Ninjutsu for whatever card you want to play. That card comes out into the battlefield and then attacks instead, and then you bounce that card that initially attacked that was unblocked back to your hand. So this deck is going to focus around that ability. So overall, pretty cool deck. It's definitely a deck that is a little bit more on the tempo side. You attack in, you bounce things back. But definitely a cool deck that they're definitely kind of like messing around with. I would say it's decent in a starter deck. Looks like we got Kotose, the Silent Spider, 5 mana, 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, exile target card other than a basic land card from an opponent's graveyard. Search that player's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with the same name as that card and exile them. Then that player shuffles for as long as you control her. You may play one of those exiled cards and spend mana as though it's mana any color. So it's definitely kind of cool. Steal something your opponent has, spell-wise and or creature-wise. You then gain all the copies they may have of that card from their deck under her, and then you may cast those cards as you see fit based on how the game goes. So definitely a cool card. Doesn't have ninjutsu, but is still a ninja, so it fits that ninja archetype. After that, we have Satora Umizawa, a 3 mana legendary creature ninja that whenever you activate a ninjutsu ability, look at the top 3 cards of our library, put one of them into our hand, the rest on the bottom of our library in any random order. This trigger only once each turn, and each creature card in your hand has ninjutsu of 4. So if it doesn't have ninjutsu, all the creatures that we then now have ninjutsu of 4. So it takes like a card like a Kotose, makes her a ninjutsu of 4, which is definitely very, very good and allows us to kind of get additional ninjutsu effects. Then Kaido, the Shizuki, the 3 mana planeswalker that at the beginning of our end step, if enter the battlefield this turn, you phase this out. But The +1 ability is you draw a card and discard a card unless you attack this turn. -2, we create a 1/1 ninja creature token that can't be blocked. And the -7, whenever a creature we control deals damage to a player, you search our library for a blue or black creature card, put it onto the battlefield, and shuffle. So definitely a good card, definitely a very good tempo card, as allows us to kind of dig a little bit deeper by drawing with the +1. Maybe get that that ninjutsu ability out with the ninja token, or we can get to the -7 possibly, and then start just getting things out from the graveyard. After that, we have Nashi, Moonsage Scion, 3 mana, 3/2 with ninjutsu of 4. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we exile top card of each player's library, and at end of turn, you may play one of those cards. If you cast a spell this way, you may pay life equal to its mana rather than pay its mana cost. So if you have a lot of life, you can pay one of your opponent's spells by paying the life instead of paying the mana cost. Definitely kind of cool. I would see the downside of it being if you didn't have the life to play maybe an expensive spell, you're flipped over your opponent's library. It doesn't say that that card then has colorless mana, so you may not be able to play it. So definitely interesting nonetheless. Then we have Bite and Palm Ninja, a 3 mana, 3/3 with ninjutsu. Enters the battlefield with a menace counter on it. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may reveal a menace counter from it. When you do, that player reveals their hand. You choose an on-land card from it and then exile it. So definitely kind of a cool ability there. If you play it for ninjutsu, it'll initially deal that damage. You then get to exile a card, and then whenever it attacks afterwards, you can then do the ability yet again. Definitely a cool little ninjutsu trick there, regardless. And then in the 1-drop slot, we have the Thousand Face Shadow, a 1 mana ninja creature with flying. Has ninjutsu of 4, which is kind of expensive, you would think, for a ninja card. But enters the battlefield from our hand. If it's attacking, create a token that's a copy of another target attacking creature. The token enters the battlefield tapped and attacking. So that's why its ability is a little bit more on the expensive side, because we are now making token copies. So you may want to play as a 1 mana 1/1 flyer, but you may want to save it off and make copies of creatures that are attacking with its 4 mana ninjutsu. But overall, an interesting deck. Ninjutsu is kind of one of those things I missed out on, as I kind of this is kind of when I took my break from playing Arena and making videos. So it is definitely going to be kind of interesting. Maybe I'll start here if I want to play Ninjutsu when this deck gets given to us, come in MTG Arena during the summer. Maybe I'll go ahead and play this version, and I'll look at ways to upgrade it. Definitely a cool deck regardless. Ninjutsu is definitely a cool ability. It's probably one of those abilities that people really like, but unfortunately I feel like it's kind of like a middle tier deck when it comes to competitive, but still decent deck that focuses really around one set, so definitely a good deck regardless. Next deck up on the list is gonna be Storm of Blades. It's a Boros deck. It's not Boros aggro. They're not giving us a Boros aggro deck, but definitely an interesting deck regardless. One of the interesting cards I just noticed, like right in the bat, I don't know if this is a subtle hint what's going to be happening come September, but we do have an Usher of the Fallen in the deck, and I don't know if that was a miss add by them, or if we're getting a reprint of it. But definitely an interesting card that they have in the deck. It's from Kaldheim. It's not printed anywhere else. But I just noticed it right off the top of it when I looked at the deck and saw what they added to it. But it's definitely a deck that plays like Samurais. Yet again, another mechanic that I really didn't do. It's a lot of things that whenever Samurai or creature we control attacks alone, certain things trigger. But definitely a cool deck regardless. We got the 4 mana 3/3 for a striker that whenever Samurai or Warrior we control attacks alone, we untap it. If it's the first combat phase this turn, there's an additional combat phase after this, so you can maybe attack with one creature, get that additional combat phase, and attack him with everything else you want to attack with. Definitely cool there. Got Thunder and Raiju here. Definitely a very good card. Regardless if it's Boros Burn or any Boros deck or mono red deck. It's a 4 mana 3/3 with haste. Whenever it attacks, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature control, and then it deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of modified creatures we control other than Thunder and Raiju. So it then creates an additional burn effect. We got Water and Emperor in the deck, which is definitely pretty awesome. A 4 mana Planeswalker with Flash. So that means we can cast that as if it was like an instant spell, which is definitely pretty cool. And then also the additional ability of it is that when she comes out, we can also use her ability immediately. So if we even cast her on our opponent's turn, we can immediately use one of her loyalty abilities, which is definitely pretty awesome. So we can either +1, give target creature +1/+1. And for strike, we can -1, create a 2/2 Samurai creature token, or we can -2 and just completely exile a tap creature they control and gain 2 life in the process. Definitely a very good Planeswalker for being a 4 mana. We also have Rasana, our Sari Commander, 3 mana creature with a 3/3 haster, that whenever it deals damage to a player, if it doesn't have indestructible counter on it, you have to put an indestructible counter on it, and then whenever we deal how much damage to a player, we we remove the indestructible counter from it, which is definitely kind of interesting. So it's like you attack in with it. If it doesn't have an indestructible counter on it, it gains 1, and then whenever it deals combat damage is dealt to us, we remove it. So definitely interesting card, but still definitely a good card. So I guess you initially attack in with it, get the indestructible counter, and then use it as a chump blocker because it now has indestructible. So unless they have exile effects, it can just kind of chump a lot of damage, which is definitely pretty cool nonetheless. Then we have Lion Sash yet again, makes an appearance in this deck. It's definitely a good card for this deck because this deck is focusing around warriors, it's focused around playing white mana as well. Eats permanent cards from graveyards, put +1/+1 counters on itself, and then we get to actually attach it to creatures we control and give them additional +1/+1 for each +1/+1 counter on it. Still a great card. We have Goro, a Disciple of Ryusei, 2 mana warrior, our Goblin Samurai, I should say. For 1 red, we can give creatures we control haste to end a turn, and for 5 mana, we can create a 5/5 red Dragon Spear creature token with flying, and activate only if we control an attack and modified creature. So definitely cool in that sense. So I think it does have to happen during combat, but still, regardless, definitely a strong ability. Outside of that, it's just a very low to the ground Samurai Warrior deck, and a lot of good Samurai Warrior abilities to go along with it. I don't know what's going on here, but maybe this is like an early spoiler that we're just not aware of, or it's just a miss add by them. But we'll see, once we officially get the decks regardless. But overall, a very, very strong, cool deck to play come standard. Yet again, another deck type that I missed out on by not really playing a lot of Kamigawa. Maybe I'll dive into some Samurai once we kind of get into that next season of standard. We'll maybe get the 2023 playlist. But with that being said, let's move on to the next deck. Now, the last deck up on the list is called Strength in Numbers, and this is definitely another interesting deck, and I feel like I kind of dabbled in on this just by looking at a couple cards in it. But it's definitely a cool little Selesnya deck for the most part. It's probably focusing around getting additional creatures or citizens and then kind of dealing damage that way. But looking at the deck overall, it seems pretty decent. We have Tauren's Fist of the Angels, a 3 mana 2/2 with training. Then whenever we cast a creature spell, we could have 1/1 green-white human creature token with training, so it also has training. Then therefore it also grows as we attack with creatures that are larger than it. We have Adeline here, definitely a strong card, definitely a good card. A 3 mana double white vigilance creature that whenever its power and toughness equal number of creatures we control. This is definitely a deck that's going to produce a lot of creatures. And then when we attack, for each opponent, create a 1/1 white human creature token tapped and attacking. Talking a player or planeswalker they control is definitely a cool card there. Wedding Announcement makes an appearance here, as it is definitely a very, very good enchantment. It pumps out 1/1 human creature tokens, and if we get 3 counters on this, then all creatures we control then get a +1/+1, which is definitely very good here. Halo Fountain makes an appearance, a 3 mana artifact that we can tap 1 mana and tap it, or tap an untapped creature, or untap a tapped creature we control. We get a 1/1 white green-white human creature citizen creature token, 2 mana. Tap it, untap 2 creatures we control, we draw a card, and then for 5 mana, untap 15 tap creatures we control, we win the game. That one's going to be a little bit harder to pull off, but the tap 1 or tap 2 abilities are definitely going to be pretty decent in this deck. Then we also have the Park Heights Pegasus, a 2 mana 2/1. It deals combat damage to a player. We draw a card if we had 2 or more creatures in the battlefield under our control. We are playing quite a bit of things that produce additional tokens, so this is definitely hopefully going to trigger at least a few times when you do play it. We also have Join the Dance, which is kind of like a way to get 2 creatures out very, very quickly. Gallagrators makes an appearance, definitely a great card for this deck. Has the Alliance ability that whenever another creature enters the battlefield under our control, we have to choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. We can +1 counters on Gallagrators. We can create a tap creature token, or tap treasure token, or we gain 2 life, which is definitely very, very good. Other than that, this deck is a very decent low to the ground. Let's just get wide in our opponent, deal a lot of damage, and just try to take advantage of our opponent that way. Definitely a cool deck to check out. It's definitely a deck that maybe you could splash in like a red and make it like Naya citizens or Naya tokens and play like Ginny Faye. It's definitely another card I could see being added to this deck, because Ginny Faye will then turn all those tokens from being not just 1/1s, they'll become 2/2s or 3/1 cats or dogs, which is definitely pretty awesome. But overall, a cool deck to start off with, especially if you're looking for a deck that just plays mostly inexpensive spells and tries to get as wide as possible. But with that being said, guys, these are just a little bit of a taste of what to expect when it comes to the new Precons. We'll have to wait and see when it comes to the fact that they have a card in there that's supposedly rotating out in one of the decks, and we'll see if that card either gets replaced or if we get a reprint, but it's still a little early to tell. I don't think they have announced anything for Dominaria. But like I said, it's definitely cool that we get to try out these decks. So if you see this video and you haven't done the event, I would say maybe dabble in it if that's your thing, and maybe kind of get an idea for maybe not just a deck that Not saying you have to play the starter decks when they come out, but maybe get an idea of what you may want to build when rotation happens and we get that 2023 standard queue until rotation happens in September. This is definitely a good way to kind of get like a base deck to maybe start off with and look to build from there. But that being said, guys, if you like the video, hit that like button. If you want to know when I post new videos on the channel, hit that subscribe button. And until next time, I'll see you in the next video. Just want to give a special shout out to the channel members here on my YouTube channel. You can also become a channel member yourself down below the video, hitting that join button. It definitely helps out a lot, and I just appreciate you guys for your support.